Great. Hi. Yeah, welcome. Today's going to be the designing games for maximum monetization discussion. So my name is Ted Verani. I'm head of business development, for Wapier. Why is this topic important? It's well, obviously mobile games, free to play. It's a big business, but designing games for that monetize well. That's tough, right? And it takes deep understanding, not just of game mechanics, or player behavior, but even, player psychology and, virtual economy tuning. So it pulls from a lot of different disciplines. So, and that's what is necessary in order to stand out from the crowd in today's competitive marketplace. So you need a game that's going to be fun, that people want to download and play, come back to, ultimately make a purchase in, hopefully too. So we're lucky we have some, experts joining us. Let me first just introduce myself again, Ted Verani. My company, Wapier, we offer an intelligent revenue management platform. Simply put, we help mobile game developers make more money. But it begins with artificial intelligence framework that allows us to predict and understand player behavior that then we use to try to influence that behavior, to offer next best action in the form of either a loyalty program designed to get people to come back more often, spend more time in the game, improve retention, or to pricing optimization. So what's the right price in the right location? So country-specific pricing or even targeted price offers. So, but before we can even worry about a rewards program or how to price your IAPs, you need a game that works. So, so let's get into that discussion. Gentlemen, maybe I guess we'll start from the screen with you, Vlad, and moving across the line. If you could each introduce yourselves, please.
Sounds good to me. Hi, my name is Vlad. I'm a co-founder of Creative Mobile. We're a mobile games developer and publisher, been around for about 10 years. And I always mess up introductions, so this time I actually wrote down some facts about the company. I'm not sure if you could see it, maybe on the recording, maybe not so much, but at least have something I can read off. We launched about 30 games in our lifetime, acquired about 400 million players through different sources, won a bunch of awards. And my main job is overseeing a portfolio of about 7 games currently in different stages, some live, some in early R&D, and making sure they're all aligned strategically, and of course, making sure they monetize well.
Okay. Simo?
Thanks, Ted. I'm Simo Peispanen. I work at Sulake as a product owner for a game called Hotel Hideaway. Hideaway is a social world, so it's a very social-oriented mobile game. Quite different from many other game-like games. So it's more of just a social interaction, hanging out with your friends, making new friends. At Sulake, we have a long history of 20 years of social worlds. So that's what we fully focus on nowadays.
Yeah, Patrick?
Yep, Patrick McGrath. I work at Wooga. I'm the product lead of June's Journey, which is a hidden object game coupled with a island decoration loop. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And a very good game. All of your games. So, so thank you guys for joining. Let me, look, before we get into sort of, I guess, the meat of the matter, kind of fundamental aspects of, what it means designing a game, and we're going to talk about, concepts to, managing live games. But, let's start with something, I guess, a little more topical, right? We're all dialing in safely at home, from our Zoom, here too. We normally would have been sharing a stage at somewhere. I think Games Forum would have had us in Barcelona, which would have been awesome. But we're not, right? We're sheltering in place as we should, here too. So, so tell us, let's talk about COVID-19 just briefly, because, downloads are great, usage is great. The reports we're seeing, revenues are going up, and we should, I guess, be humble when we say that, because I know a lot of other industries, are hurting a lot worse, but we're quite fortunate, right? Too. If each of you could maybe share a little bit, what are you seeing in your live games right now? But also thoughts about predictions for the future, as economists are predicting, a recession possibly. Maybe Patrick, starting with you.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Wooga's in Berlin, but as you could probably hear, I'm American, so keeping up with the news there. Yeah, the future is certainly unknown. But as you said earlier, we have seen higher engagement, higher monetization. One interesting thing was from a marketing aspect, what we saw with CPIs, which
Right.
We saw a lot of the market pull out of, marketing, and that allowed us to spend a little extra money at lower costs, and reach players that normally we might not have, because they're trying to find entertainment, and we're there to provide entertainment. That's what we're all here for. Now, as far as the future, you mentioned the U.S., which I think is probably
worldwide
most
recession probably, yeah.
For sure. But right now, I think day to day, the U.S. numbers are not painting a happy picture, right? I think yesterday it was almost 15% unemployment jump, from 1 month to the next. 36.5 million people applying for unemployment. This doesn't exactly bode well. One thing I would note is not to, batten down the hatches. Many of the industry's games is based on incremental, monetization techniques. So it's not, hey, spend 20 or 50 bucks, but, a couple bucks here and there. And during these times that are tough, we might not see these types of goods have a lower spend. So there's certainly two ways to look at it. It's a tricky situation, and hopefully we get out of it sooner rather than later. But I'm an optimist.
Okay, Simo, any what are you seeing in your games, and what are your thoughts? On this?
Yeah, I also have very optimistic and positive view on this, and try to look at the positives and how to turn the negatives into positives. But especially with Hideaway's case, since it's a social game. So you go in there with your avatar and you socialize with your friends and you make new friends. Hideaway has a lot more kind of potential to work better in the situation, because of the social interactions that are now much slower in real life. Then people go online and hang out with their friends. So we have seen really, really good numbers, especially on time spent. I think the users are spending about 50% more time in the game than they did before this. Of course, especially now we're talking about IAPs. It's a luxury, and obviously there has to be some recession after the things cool down. So there might be some drop in terms of monetization in mobile games after we go back to normal.
Yeah. Vlad, anything you'd like to add, or your perspective on what's happening with your games right now during this unprecedented times?
Our experience so far has been similar to what Patrick said. We had an awesome April, particularly for the UA guys. Really, all the games we operate set revenue records. That's something we don't see happen too often. However, to add to this, since a couple of weeks ago, we see a reversal. We've seen a sharp decline with our number one UA network. And it's not clear at this point if this is just a case of some positive effects being kind of rolled back and advertisers returning and competition rising again, or just a case of ad networks shifting the cost of this problematic situation onto the developers and publishers. There's no official answer to that, obviously. And thinking about the longer term, we had those conversations at London where we tried to kind of model the possible scenarios, but it's hard because the ecosystem we live in is so complex. We have all the different actors who influence each other, like the ad networks, the publishers, the players themselves. And even if we agree that, and this is something I fundamentally believe in, if we agree that mobile games provide a lot of bang for your buck compared to other forms of entertainment, and that the demand is going to stay there, we don't know how all the other guys are going to respond. How is Facebook going to respond? How is Google going to respond? So it's incredibly complex. So our strategy so far is to work double hard and hope for the best.
I'm with you there, yeah. And I think Google and Facebook have announced they're expecting a drop in revenue too, and they're taking the long game on this stuff too. So, it'll be interesting to see how everyone responds. And one would expect that people aren't, sure, in the gig economy, Uber is not going to be advertising anytime soon, still kind of theme of the COVID. So, and the reason I ask is actually just I wrote an article on kind of, it's free to play recession proof. Probably should have asked this question with you guys before, right? but I think since we're talking, are you thinking about new games now? Because that's a question, right? Would you invest in a new game knowing that kind of the return, the payout for that, could be way down the road, or do you double down on kind of your proven games, your kind of your winners that you work right now, investing in live ops and features on that? Just maybe anyone with a comment on that, if you want to jump in, that'd be great. Or just stick with you, Vlad. You just
We are investing in new games right now.
Okay.
Because that's otherwise we set ourselves up for a very difficult 2021, and we just put all the eggs in one basket. I wouldn't say that we are recession-proof by any means. I don't think anyone is recession-proof 100%, especially when we cannot forecast anything and we haven't seen anything quite like this before. Anything could happen. But we believe that it's crucial to always have something else coming through the pipeline.
Okay, makes sense. And agreed, we don't have recession, right? 2008, last recession, free to play didn't exist. So it's kind of hard to, we don't have exactly something to look, hard upon. So Simo, anything to add, about, the new games versus live games, or it's just you agree with what Vlad says?
Yeah, I do agree, but I have to say that now is the perfect time to fully focus on the live operations, because the new players, they are much cheaper now, and they play much more, they retain more, and they invite more of their friends. So you basically double down on all of these. So it's a really, really good time to focus on the live operations.
Okay. Patrick, agree, disagree, move on, next one.
Yeah, agree. I mean, Wooga's in a very nice position that it's not an or question for us. It's and, like, we will do both.
Glad to hear. Okay, so let's get to more of the fundamental stuff, right? Regardless of what's going on, in the current environment, right? It's like, so I guess we'll begin with you, Patrick, since we finished. Go back. Is what is your development process from getting some concept, to launch?
Oh boy. Well, I've been on June's journey for about 2.5 years. So since I've been at Wooga, so this is more from my experience at other companies and speaking about that. But really, first I would talk about concepting, really understanding the market that you're trying to address, kind of know what you want, right? What genre, what demographics, these type of things. And from this, you can kind of spot some of the gaps and the areas in the market that could be addressed. From that, like, time to get to creating a game, right? Like, the landscape. Now it's, okay, find something that has a fun mechanic, develop the core loop, the theming. Especially at Wooga, this is very important to us because we do pride ourselves on creating a deeper type of game as far as narrative. So theming is a big piece that actually goes in early for these games. From there, you have your gate reviews, your milestones. I think that we could all run through and talk for this.
We'll get back to some of those. I'm curious about some of the KPIs.
Certainly, what you're trying to test early on is just engagement. Later, you're then looking at retention. Of course, good luck with an LTV. Without good retention, right? Like, that's just kind of the lifeblood of the game. Do people stick around? And honestly, that's just, pretty highly correlated of, it gets back to us creating a medium of entertainment, right? And are people entertained? Well, do they show up the next day? Do they show up in 7 days? Do they show up in 14 days? And when they show up, how long are they showing up? What kind of engagement, user behavioral, what features, these type of things. And so through this process, you're just really trying to mitigate risk from one milestone to the next as you're going through development and into soft launch, because you really want to have a lot of kind of a full, not a full feature set, but certainly stuff to test in live ops for soft launch.
Makes sense. Okay. So Vlad, I remember a while back, you're talking about something like minimum viable monetization. So tell us what that is, right? So kind of same, I'm thinking like the development process, so kind of same lines as that.
Yeah, it's something I invented for, ease of communication within the company. And I'm making an argument that if a game is any good, I mean, it has the fundamental parameters that describe it as potentially a decent free-to-play mobile game, as in, it can be split into sessions of the right size. It has some entities we can potentially reproduce and sell. Those really basic things. If these boxes are checked, then we can monetize it with a set of very crude tools applied during the first couple of days of gameplay, and we can monetize it to a level where we can do some profitable UA on a small scale. And that small scale means something in the region of 30,000, 50,000 a month for us. And this is, this could be any number really, based on the goals. For us, this allows us to have some new players coming in, keep the DAUs in the region of 5,000, maybe 10,000, 15,000 in some cases, and work with the game. So this is an important step for validating that we can actually monetize this, and being able to work with the game right away and have a sensible number of data points that we can play with. And I'm kind of contrarian on retention as the target metric.
Okay.
I really like to monetize stuff early because I think I spent many years focusing on retention, and I think by now I understand the practical applications of it pretty well, but it's failed me in some cases where the game was really innovative, and with the kind of game that's familiar, where you have, maybe you're not explicitly copying something, but you are using some building blocks that you're familiar with, then you can predict how it's going to monetize if you can retain the players. In some cases, it's really difficult to do. And I can't pay my Facebook bills with retention. So I really encourage my designers to monetize the game right away and be aggressive about it. Worst case scenario, we're gonna alienate some people, but this is soft launch or even, prototype testing with a very limited scope. So nothing bad can happen. What can happen in the other scenario is that we assume that we can build a game that's engaging and monetize as well. And then once we get there, and we have nothing to sell, but we are committed, we are like elbows deep in production, have a big team. So I really try to be aggressive, and I really try to lean on reward videos, first offer, aiming for 10% conversion on day 0 in tier 1 countries. And in some cases, some variation of very lightweight subscription or like event pass, but this is more rare.
Okay, so you're getting a monetization earlier on too. So Sima, what are your thoughts on this too? And maybe you have a different view on where retention fits.
Yeah, very interesting to hear your thoughts on this, and it really shows that you come from very different genres of games than I do, because the answer from me is quite different, but I think both of them are completely correct. For me, retention is everything at the start when we talk about really, really long-term games that players play for years and years. Especially with virtual worlds, where you can basically input features after it's been out for years that really monetize and become core loop. So basically, we just focused fully on longevity at the start of Hideaway, because basically, like Patrick mentioned, lifetime without LTV without the long lifetime, it's good luck with that. It doesn't work. Yeah. Because especially with so it's not only about D3 retention or D30 retention. It's more like month 6 retention. But of course, when you're doing a soft launch, you can't see those 6-month data points at that time. So it takes a long time. So it really depends on the genre of the game. But for us, we really focus on the very, very long-term retention. And after players have been there for quite, let's say, 3 months, we want the drop to be very, very small from month to month. So basically, the longer the players are there, the more chances we have to convert them. So we don't have to convert them on day 1. If the average lifetime is like 60 days, we have 60 different days to convert them. But if the average lifetime is 7, you have 7 days to convert them. Also, the K factor is quite a bit higher when the players have been there for months and months. So you get quite a bit more organic traffic.
So I understand, okay, focusing on long-term retention, 6 months is a very long. but what KPIs then are important for you then to even get out of soft launch, at that point?
I'd say short-term retention, such as D1 to D3 ratio, is pretty important, and of course you do need to get some validation on the monetization KPI, so they can't be 0.
Okay, so Simo already mentioned about how genre had kind of slightly different depending on kind of genre. So kind of taking sort of the same theme. Patrick, your games are very story driven, right? You said narrative, hidden object, games too, and also appeal to women in a particular way. Is it what you said? Does it change at all how you look at it, these fundamentals, or by genre for you?
So the question is, how do I look at KPIs depending on genre?
Well, it's KPIs are just the kind of, we're talking about some of the fundamentals of, designing a game for concept to launch. We're talking about that too.
Oh, for sure.
I know you took over June's journey kind of midway the game being live, but yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if we were designing a casino game versus a puzzle game, that's totally different. An RPG versus a racing game. I mean, hyper casual versus anything with a deeper meta, right? Like, I mean, you actually have to approach these things totally different. And as Vlad said, I don't know if you guys are doing hyper casual, but that business model is so different than any of the other previous game types that I was speaking about. But each one does have to approach their core audience different, and the monetization techniques are different. But a lot of the fundamentals, the core is always there. They're going to come, they're going to engage, they're going to retain, they're going to spend. Like, these are the things that we need to look at and figure out what the healthy balance is.
Okay, so they're going to, and hopefully spend, right? So we want to try to convert players into payers. So what are then the?
We have a business to run.
We have a business to run. So I guess jumping up to you, Vlad. What are some of the fundamental reasons that why players convert into payers?
Emotions.
Emotions. Okay.
I always tell my my producers and everyone else in the company that we are primarily in the business of selling emotions, because that's what people ultimately pay for. That's my view on the topic. And we need two things in a mobile game, and free-to-play game for that matter, to be able to make it work: content and context, which brings meaning to the content. So we always think long and hard about the cost of content, how much of different types of objects and how many instances of each object we can have in a game 2 years down the road, maybe 5 years down the road. But we also think about context and what kind of emotions will be associated with it. And what I advise to myself and to producers and game designers all the time when we're facing hard problems is to remove ourselves from the video game industry environment mentally and think of the game in question as something that's very brick and mortar, like, let's say, bar. Removing all the pre-existing ideas and concepts and, oh, we've done this and we've done that, these guys are doing this, and think about just a bunch of people in a bar. Some are drinking beer, some are drinking water, some are just staring at you, and these are our players. And then it kind of changes the perception a little bit, because, for example, for many years I've heard people say that 5% conversion rate to payers is a good benchmark that we should be aiming for, maybe slightly above it. But if we think about a bar, 5% of people actually buying drinks, and everyone else just sitting there, sipping water, maybe taking some freebies. I wouldn't want to have that in my bar. Is there any fundamental reason why this is happening? Probably not. Maybe these people want something else. Maybe they want cocktails. Maybe they want food. Maybe they don't like the environment. And in the game that I run, there's no fundamental reason why we're supposed to have 95% of people just taking freebies. We're just not delivering the experience. We're not creating the context for them. We're not presenting the goods in the right manner. And the same goes for selling more expensive in-app purchases, for example. If you think about guys in the bar drinking beer, like cheap lager, it's probably not making you that much money. How do you sell a cocktail, for example? How do you sell an old fashioned? Well, old fashioned has something associated with it because you want to be drinking, you know, in an appropriate place with appropriate people, and you want to have an appropriate drink because there's some context behind it. So we have to create a context in the game, and then people will understand why this is valuable, because ultimately it's just pixels, right? So we really focus on creating the context and thinking about the emotions that we want to tickle and deliver the value by creating something that makes sense and is meaningful to the players.
Makes sense. And when you mentioned bar and an analogy, I noticed that I took a sip of my coffee, by the way, gentlemen. And I think Simo, you took a drink too, so maybe I'll go over to you. Is it shows a kind of subliminal kind of message. We talk about player psychology and stuff too, and making suggestions. So, what are tips for communicating kind of value when designing IAPs? So, Simo, any thoughts, on that?
Yeah.
We want someone to make a purchase, right?
Yeah, it's this basic principle that a player who is confused will not pay. So you need to be really precise that you give them the clarity, not just the value, but so that the user really understands what they're buying, and that it is the best thing now to buy. And it depends on how complex the game is. Let's say hyper casual or casual games, they have such a small number of features that you can really clearly see the value within like 1 or 2 days. But if you have really complex games, it might take a couple of weeks of gameplay to really understand that which is the best thing to buy. So that's why sometimes the conversion comes much later. But as Vlad said, selling feelings, selling emotions, that's definitely the key to everything. So we are doing games. Games are fun. You should get those big dopamine spikes out of buying. So often some of the best ways to do that is RNG. So loot box mechanics, they are fun, but then there's other sorts of problems with them.
Okay. Patrick, anything to add around the idea of communicating value?
Not really. I mean, of course, like the consumer psychology, big piece, delighting players, and then of course the value proposition, right? Like just making it clear, and when that player purchases and has this already expectation of what they're purchasing, pretty easy, and then making that experience even, a delight for players, I think is really. It just gets back to the fundamental of the emotions, and this dopamine drop.
I like the idea of where emotions and the dopamine too. So sticking with you, Patrick, then, because you touched on earlier about designing games, and we talked about, like you mentioned, hyper casual, right? And so too, it's different games. So what are your thoughts or experience when it comes to like ad monetization versus IAP monetization kind of within your games? I mean, is it fair to simply to say that games with more engagement, requiring greater skill, those make sense for more IAPs, versus
At least from June's Journey standpoint, we have both. Both contribute very strongly to our bottom line. We have 3 placements for ads. I think that there's different ways that you can even very early in the design process start to design around economic benefits and that value proposition of, hey, watch this ad and get this thing that helps you progress. And of course, the IEP, depending on what you're selling and the value proposition there, should expedite that progression, or even we see so much of these big games nowadays. It's all about the word is slipping my mind, but the vanity items, right? So it's not even things that help progression. Look at Fortnite, look at Call of Duty, almost anything with a battle pass, right? It's a ton of vanity items attributed to this as a monetization technique. And so, at least from my standpoint, I think it's very easy to balance these things, depending on how big your game is, how complex. Hyper casual might have a tough time doing that.
True. Okay. Well, what about I think you mentioned this, rewarded ads, right? So rewarded ads are they've done really well, for most games. I think we all, agree on that too. But have you seen evidence of where maybe reward ads might cannibalize, or are there instances actually where rewarded ads, will increase, IAP revenues? So, what do you think, Vlad? What do you think on that?
Oh, it can definitely cannibalize if you not keep the larger picture of your economy in mind when designing. Like, basically, if you give people too much stuff, which is ruining the fine balance of difficulty and in the purchases that you've built, that's possible. Most of the time, we don't fall for that trap because we always like to have different currencies in the game or different sets of valuable items that might not necessarily be a currency, but this is something we can play with without cannibalizing another layer of monetization, which is nicely isolated. One basic example: hard currency versus soft currency. Give soft currency for videos, give some loot boxes for videos if you can afford that, if they're not too expensive in relation to the other entities in the game, but not give the hard currency. This is very crude, but this is one of the very simple way to kind of isolate it and protect yourself against any unexpected damage to the balance. But most of the time we do not really run that risk because we can, our approach to monetization when it comes to rewarded videos is you need to find one perfect placement, and then you can augment that with secondary placements for different types of play behavior, maybe different types of player profile. But you have to find one that really makes sense. We have this example of a game which we did not design to be primarily supported by ads, but where we had this a very successful entry point for rewarded videos, where we have levels that can be completed within 1, 2, 3 minutes, and then we have rewards that can be easily doubled, as in they speed up progression somewhat, but there's another type of resource that's required to kind of complement them. So they're not, answering all the questions for the player, but they are really nice to have. And we just created a very simple dialogue which asks, would you like to double your rewards for this level? And it's got a 60% engagement rate, maybe even 65 by now. And as a result, and people use it religiously. I use it religiously while playing, even though I'm not the kind of person who would invest, hours into watching rewarded videos in the game like some people do. I watch it because it's hard to say no to this kind of proposition. Like, do you want to double your win? Yeah, sure, I want to double this win. I don't want to cancel this. I want to close this. And in the end, 10 cents ARPDAU in the US just from displacement. It's not bad at all. And, in many cases, that's all we need. And we could have done it differently. We could have done a button, somewhere which says X2, like we've done it many times. And that would give us 25% engagement at best. So there's a big difference. And people love it, they even appreciate being reminded about this opportunity. So it's not cannibalizing any one in-app purchases, and it's not hurting the overall user experience in any way we can measure or see from the play test, for example.
That's good. Okay. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit. We were talking about concept and developing kind of your initial game too. I want to talk about managing and a game for the long term too. But and I turn over to you, Simo first. But Simo, let me give you an opportunity just to kind of add anything more about ads versus IPs. Do you think we've kind of covered it in your response to what Patrick or Vlad have said, or move on?
I think that was quite well covered.
I
agree.
I think they nailed it. Yeah, I think they nailed it. But so this stick with you, Simo, because remembering when we first met in Helsinki, and there in 2018 actually too, and you were also working with Hotel Hideaway then, and as you still are. And I remember you were your game was doing 200 to 300,000 monthly active users, and you kind of very casually sort of said, yeah, in a year we're going to be to 1 million monthly active users, right? And I liked that because it's kind of not only just bold, but you did do it in less time than 1 year, and it continues to grow and it's doing well. So this is all kind of before. So tell us about that journey, right? And taking the older game, existing game that was doing fine, and then building it up into something that's much better.
Yeah. So our goal was to grow towards the 1 million monthly actives, and we did that, and us slowly and steadily growing still. basically how we were able to pull that off without, driving much money to UA. We still do some UA, but it's not crazy numbers. We did test a lot about the UA and different markets, and definitely what was a big surprise for us was Southeast Asia. So even though our game is monetized fully through clothes and furniture, and it's really Western themed, and basically really made for US market, and US was almost all of our users back then. Then we started trying Indonesia, Thailand, did a little bit of UA in Indonesia, and we just went viral there. And ever since last, I think, spring, when we started Indonesia, we haven't really done UA there anymore, but we still get a ton of installs every month there organically. So that was the key to increase our monthly active users very heavily. And the other one is being really kind of keep the perseverance and steadiness. Try to drive the steadiness in all of the KPIs, and slowly chug along, because our long-term retention is very high, and we keep a really active live operations, so that keeps the old users really happy. So that after the users have been in the game for 6 months, the drop from month-to-month retention is something like 80%. So once you get the users in, they really start to pile up after a couple of years.
Okay, good. And well done. How about you, Vlad? How about you? I mean, Nitro Nations, a game also that's been around for a while, that you've been able to kind of manage for the it's done really well in the marketplace. And you did a really big update with Drift. Maybe just share us a little bit of your experiences there, and advice or lessons learned.
Small updates did all the work for us.
Small updates?
Yeah, and I've become, over the years, I've become skeptical about people coming into the room and saying, okay, we've got this fundamental change we want to implement. It's going to turn this game around and give players way more, opportunities in the game, and including myself, because I'm that kind of guy. I like to bring this kind of bold ideas to the table and say, hey guys, why don't we reposition it in the market and be something else? But what gave us the whatever it was, 2.5x, 3x LTV growth, and the 7x revenue growth for the last 3 years was a series of minor tweaks, changing the presentation of the shop in the game to highlight the more relevant items, and present them in a meaningful way that explains the value better, tweaking the ads, placing more emphasis on opt-in ads. We went from maybe 5% ad revenue to 20% ad revenue, which is quite substantial. And if you look at it from the UA perspective, the UA guys will always appreciate that extra 15% on top of the current LTV model they're looking at. One of the more interesting things that we are doing in Nitro Nation now, but have already rolled out in the other games, is using AI to generate any purchases for the players. And this is really hard to do, but we really double down on that tech, and we built it over 2 years in-house. And we've seen transparent and consistent increases of 10 to 20% on top of baseline. And I think, Ted, you'll love it because of your background. We actually got there. So we're happy about that tech, which takes lots and lots of data points and lots of fine cohorts, and subtly tweaks the composition of the offers we're generating to be more oriented towards a specific player type.
That's good. Well, I'm glad to hear that too. And I'm also glad to hear that. And I like the message of lots of little tweaks kind of get you there versus big updates. Because you do hear about, a lot of people just say, okay, we're just going to do the massive update. Everything else stops. So that's good to hear too. Patrick, here, so you switch it, so sort of same idea. I mean, also I want, hear any, if you have any quick thoughts of because you did take over June's journey midway, but also, I'm aware, that
a month after launch.
After launch, yeah. You took over to launch.
A couple months at least, I should say.
Sorry, what was that?
A couple months after launch, but yeah.
Okay, a couple months after launch. So, but what I'm impressed by is also you did a lot of your growth came also from international expansion. If I'm correct me, I'm wrong, on that too. And so I'm curious, and any other like tips you have maybe for optimizing your games for different countries, right? We heard also Simo says Southeast Asia was kind of a surprise, but was yours kind of a surprise, or was more deliberate? What were you doing there to there? And
well, I mean, it was. I would say it's less of a surprise. I mean, we had growth everywhere, so we were in a very fortunate position. We were doing both, large scale features, small scale features, and optimization at the same time. Basically, throwing the kitchen sink at it. And part of that strategy was going into new territories. I think I said before that, going into Russia, some of these APAC countries, they certainly help. And for the cost of Loca, fixed cost, and for a game like us that, you're talking about long-term retention, we're actually now starting to look at cohorts of 720 and factoring that into our LTV. And so, I mean, we have quite a few users that stick around for not a year, but years. And so looking at that and expansion into new territories, of course, and as these territories become more mature, we want to be the go-to hidden object game in those territories. So it has been a part of our expansion, and it currently still has a place in our current expansion plans.
And when you go into new territories, are you using how are you doing translation? Is it machine translation, or are you using human beings? Is it American English for everyone, or just English?
So right now, English until we properly do localization. Then we do localization QA, kind of make sure that. I mean, so June's Journey is based in 1920s, and to even do it in English, there are words where I'm scratching my head like, what the hell is a valise? And now I know all this stuff, but like, oh, you mean a duffel bag? Oh, okay. But we have these words from the 1920s that are a little difficult to translate, and some of the way that they speak is just difficult to hit that tone. And so we do have to do a lot of human translation just to make sure that we're hitting the right tone. There's death in the game. We don't want the tone to be like, haha, my sister just died. And, we've had situations where this happens just because the way it's translated properly, but the tone isn't quite there. There's a letter or a word that has to be switched around. So it does, take time, takes a little money, but for us, of course, it pays off, especially in these larger territories that are starting to develop and starting to mature.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Seema, anything else to add? I mean, you talk about globalization, Southeast Asia. Are you guys doing anything different in terms of seasonal events, to make it more multicultural, or just, people just like you mentioned, it was kind of designed for, US audience primarily. Is it still the case, or are you doing some other stuff?
Now we're still using just one server, so every single user is just using the same server and they can interact with each other. But we have localized the game for, I think, 14 different languages now. And gradually we have also started to make a lot more localized clothes and furniture. So we're doing a lot of traditional Southeast Asia, Thailand, Thai and Indonesian themed or styled clothes, which are now selling really well. And cool thing is that they are selling also really well globally. So also, US users are also purchasing them quite nicely.
US is a very multicultural country.
I would say that we see the same thing with June's. We haven't quite got to the level of what I've seen other games like 8-Ball Pool had a talk about specifically localizing all content and sales to specific countries. But yeah, as you said, having some type of content that is localized to that country. Like we had a Japanese set that was really big in the US, but also turns out that the Japanese kind of appreciate that as well. So really interesting to localize content around that.
Anything else to add, Vlad, or we may move on?
Yeah, one of my biggest regrets with live ops on Nitro Nation is never getting the Russian cars in the game, because we have a large Russian community, and we are licensing all the cars. So we actually approached Lada and whoever else is there with the proposal to license their cars, but I don't think they took us seriously. They're like, really? Our cars for a racing game? Spam folder, block, spam and block. Otherwise, we do that because as other guys correctly know, it's not just for that audience. You know, the Japanese might appreciate the Japanese content. There's going to be a whole lot of people, you know, in the United States, in Germany, sometimes in very unexpected locations is going to appreciate that kind of content, and they're actually more willing to spend on it because, you know, how many people are fans of all things Japanese, you know? And I know that in the UK, for example, there's a huge following for Russian cars. You know, we don't appreciate those cars at all. And but they have become classics in some other places. So we celebrate everything, and we try to bring as much regional flavor as we can. Not quite at a level where we do this custom tailored for every country, but you know, we found that the more you have in terms of diversity, the better.
Cool. Any what you know, Simo, maybe starting with you, you know, now, you know, too. What recent monetization trends or maybe new innovative ideas have you seen that you think are interesting? That maybe you've seen them before too?
Well, one that comes to mind is not necessarily a new one, but more of becoming really, really popular over the past year, which is obviously Battle Pass. And what I really like about Battle Passes in mobile games, I mean, almost everyone is doing them now. I think they really open up a new type of payer, because there's a big group of people who play a lot of mobile games, but they have this ideology that they will never pay any money, because then, you know, then it's a bottomless pit. I'm gonna, you know, lose all my savings. I'm just gonna pay and pay and pay, because if you just buy, let's say you buy diamonds and you buy goods with them and you do it again and again, and there's no like wall where it ends. But with a battle pass, you pay that 5 to 10 euros per month, and that's it. You cannot pay more to that. But then on the other hand, if you look at KPIs or the monetization KPIs from a game that sells battle passes, and you check that, okay, these users were converted by battle passes, how much did they pay after that? And it's not zero, it's more. So yeah, it's a really good design, and it fits, I could say, almost any type of game, which is pretty cool.
Okay, I was going to ask that whether it's because I mean, you know, obviously, you know, Fortnite, you know, and Clash of Clans, you know, PUBG. I mean, it's some very big games. You know, have, you know, kind of famously sort of done well with it. But you think it, you know, doesn't necessarily need to be just hugely popular games. It can work with most games.
Yeah, it can definitely work with. We've been thinking about adding it to Hideaway. We haven't yet had time to do it, but I think it will get there.
Okay.
I mean,
glad agreeing. So I want to ask him. You know, but you know, Patrick, you know, like what, you know, anything?
Yeah, I mean,
just the Battle Pass, or just, you know, different monetization trend.
Well, just Battle Pass certainly has kind of been the big gorilla in the room, the new entrant that's, I mean, not so new. It's been around for quite some time, but popularized of late. The thing that you kind of pointed out with those games is like the economic scalability, and one of the things about Battle Pass is this illusion of control, where, you know, you pay this amount up front, here's a ton of rewards, right? Yeah. Like really big payoff. You just have to engage about 10 times as much as you normally would, right? For the next month or 2 months. So I would totally agree. Like there's a lot of flexibility in battle passes for all games. One of the pet peeves, I've really been playing a lot of battle passes, or looking into battle passes lately, because we're looking at possibly, you know, dipping our toe into that. One of my pet peeves though is bad battle passes. They're just poor value proposition. The ones that are too complex. You know, there's like systems within the system. It's like,
you want to name anyone?
Pass. Like, come on.
Do you want to name anyone or no?
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, there's one game that I've really been taking a look at just because of the breadth and depth of their feature set. Of course, the anime style is a little iffy and having an IP, but Seven Deadly Sins Grand Cross came out to the Western markets maybe 2 months ago.
Mhm.
And just right away, the amount of content in that game, the live ops systems, and they just added a battle pass that is just overly complicated for no reason, when they could have just had a very simple value proposition and really got people to engage in different ways.
Makes sense. I mean, I like battle passes too, just because I like it. Well, as particularly as opposed to say loot boxes, right? You know, you're paying for something, but you're paying to reward people actually playing the game, right? You know, it's not just like a, loot boxes sort of just kind of smell like gambling a little bit, you know. But anyway, does anyone want to defend loot boxes? You know, you feel free, you know, or is that just a slimy tactic?
I'll defend them a little, just a little. Okay. Like they have their place. I certainly think they have their place. I mean, they can be predatory. And honestly, it is on us because it's not regulated everywhere, only a few countries, but it's on us to kind of regulate this ourselves and not and become predatory loot box machines. But I mean, we do have loot boxes in June's Journey, but I would say that they're nice loot boxes.
Of course, there. Yeah,
yeah, of course.
Look, it's one of those things that gets a lot of press. People text. So I think you're right, and I like your idea. Like we regulate ourselves within this industry, then Belgium doesn't have to come in. Right? And so
I mean, the last thing we want is people that don't know games to come in and regulate games.
Okay, yeah, 100% agreed. So any other comments? Monetization trends, Vlad? Anything you would like to share? Or, disagree with, agree with, or just a different monetization trend you're seeing?
I'm so on board with what the guys have been saying, both about battle passes and loot boxes.
Okay.
If we can do it right. I was reviewing the game for a friendly studio recently who just added the battle pass system. And, most battle passes have levels. That makes sense. And their levels were hard. Like I played for a day. I could only complete maybe one of the 10 daily tasks that contribute towards this level score. And that's just wrong because every level up is your chance to present the battle pass itself and say, hey, you got this, you're also missing out on this. All the rewards you've accumulated, you're level 50 now. And here are the 120 things that you can get if you sign up for the battle pass finally. And it's such a minor thing, it's hugely influential. So it's so easy to get it wrong, and it's the same for loot boxes. If you are transparent about this, what's wrong with a little bit of chance in the game? That's a game after all. There's a bit of intrigue, there's anticipation, these are the emotions we are coming for in many instances. And I love loot boxes as a player. There's just one type of loot box I hate. I hate the PUBG loot boxes. Not PUBG mobile, but PUBG desktop. Because I play 4 hours, I get a loot box, and there's some dirty shirt that I have 5 instances of. Now that is just bad. If the loot boxes are fun, if the ritual of opening loot boxes is well designed and it's beautiful, and I have this build up of anticipation, and I realistically understand my chances, and every once in a while I get something special, that's an enjoyable experience. I could build a game around that, just a game about opening loot boxes. If it's beautiful and well designed and rewarding, why not?
Good. Yeah.
Look at Hearthstone card packs. That's technically a loot box, right? The RNG, you get the pack. It just feels good.
Yeah, this ritual of open, tier 1 open, and I love how Top Drives did it, because they have those card packs in the game, and they actually look like physical, like plastic packs that you can tier the top of. I love that. This creates so much, emotion in me, as opposed to purely mathematical odds and I got this car, I can use it for this.
Yeah. That makes sense. So no one mentioned anything about, and I guess it's not a new monetization trend, to be fair, but what about any comments? Anyone can jump in on subscriptions. As something with as a way to monetize, and also how do subscriptions maybe fit with IAPs? Anyone want to raise your hand? Or
I actually see that subscriptions and battle pass, especially in free-to-play mobile games, very often they're the same thing with a little bit of different name, because both of them you can design to be basically really close to each other.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so Battle Pass, it's just a subscription to get access to more goodies, right? And to kind of accelerate. So yeah, so that makes sense. Any other thoughts on subscriptions? It's just one of those things that kind of keeps coming up, right? And but never really quite, taken off. Because I think I read a report, it was a news thing. So I read somewhere that like Scopely said that they've been seeing greater retention associated with monthly subscriptions, and then that subscribers then even have a steeper kind of ARPU curve than non-subscribers, right? So if you have IAPs behind, subscription too. So curious if you have seen something similar or thoughts, pro or against.
Not quite, but I have something to add to this.
Yeah.
When we added real subscriptions for the first time in the game, real as in not one shot in the purchases that get presented as subscriptions, but actually the ones that get renewed automatically and can be purchased for like 3 months, 6 months in advance. We saw a surprisingly high number of people who did not cancel. Yeah. And that's not because of people forgetting to cancel. There is a small percentage of those guys as well, but they cancel afterwards. On month 2 they remember, they look at their statement, they remember, we know because they email us and say, hey, I didn't want this, I wanted to cancel. But we saw a surprising number of people carry on, even though, quite frankly, our implementation was not good at all. It was just an annuity dressed up as a subscription. So it didn't give any exclusive content. It didn't give any special status in the game. It's the worst type of subscription I can imagine, but that's all we could muster at that time with that game. And we saw like 60% of people renewing after the first month. And that was amazing. That was way above what I expected. And it's easy to do the math, because, it's going to be like this. It's rather predictable. You can build a model out of this rather easily. And there you have your, extra LTV projection augmenting your existing, like in the purchases LTV model and add cohort LTV model, which is very nice.
Okay. I don't know, we're kind of closely running out of time, but this is got a couple more, questions. Let's pull out our crystal balls here, and it's like any predictions as it, pertains to free-to-play monetization. So we'll, maybe Patrick, start, with you.
Yeah, predictions. Well, I mean, it's not so much of a prediction, right? We've already talked about it.
Easy predictions.
Well, I think right now we're going through a pretty heavy phase of almost everyone kind of doubling down on segmentation. I think we've all tangentially touched it or directly in this call. But I think one thing that might affect monetization soon is tying in like segmented user experiences, because as we said, like fundamentally it's about that experience with the monetization aspect, like really marrying these two things, not just optimizing around pain points, but possibly looking through user behavior and creating, maybe not creating these key points earlier or later, but finding the optimal times possibly to do that through content and essentially having the user experience, the progression tie with monetization. Of course, this gets borderline predatory. So again, like as an unregulated industry, like this is something that we need to watch and really have the user's best interest. Other than that, yeah, I mean, we talked about Battle Pass being the new piggy bank, and we already touched on RNG. Like RNG is really just, to me, king, and not the company, but like a very good method to have users have this emotional response. I mean, even as we're talking about opening card packs, right? Like the nostalgia of that. And depending on the different genre, I think there's ways that you can incorporate that, unboxing for your RNG, loot box, and making sure that the value is there, I think is important.
Yeah.
So sorry, not, I know we're running out of time, but
yeah,
innovative ideas, but.
Any other quick, thoughts or, or even genres that are underserved, kind of futures, because it seems like, last year, right, when it was like, hyper casual kind of blew up, it's kind of mentioned earlier, ad support, it sort of seems like it's going to, even squeezing out other, like mid-core seems like it's kind of getting squeezed out between kind of hyper casual and core at the other end, right? With battle, kind of battle royale style, kind of games too. Is that, but any thoughts on genres or other things about, predictions of futures that anyone like to add?
Yeah,
Go ahead. You were first.
Yeah. So now that you mentioned the core, one thing that we've seen over the past year or 2 years is that many mid-core games, they have received all these social groups and group competitive play, which are definitely core features. And that's basically one of the pretty much untapped potentials I could see that could be heavily monetized, is that these group competitions, this social side, that you have this, top 1% of players who basically use as much money as they want, as long as they win the competitions. And to win these competitions, maybe you could help yourself win them by, buying gifts to your teammates or stuff like that. Because as we mentioned earlier, selling emotions is one of the best ways to sell. So maybe with that you can make yourself feel really good because A, you win, B, you make your friend feel really good because they got a lot of free stuff, and then the friend feels really good because they got a lot of free stuff. So I think gifting is well some games do have that already, but it's such a small part that some games like Empires and Puzzles, I think they have this offer like maybe 2-3 times a year, where you buy with €5, you get like maybe €2 worth of diamonds for yourself, and all your alliance members get like 30 diamonds. And then basically everyone buys it, and everyone gets maybe €10 or €15 worth of diamonds. But that's only 3 times a year. Maybe you could do that all the time.
Oh. Vlad, you raised your hand a little earlier.
Yeah, I had exactly the same point as Simo regarding gifting being a little bit underrepresented, and being like doing this kind of community work within the game and helping the other guys out. We rarely create really good tools for that, and I think many of us kind of reserve it to very complex MMORPGs where there's a lot of these mechanics that are kind of fundamental to the experience. But this is such a basic thing, right? Almost any game can be a good base for one person doing something nice for the other person, and the other person giving them credit for it. So maybe we're not leaning on it as much as we could have. But to introduce something different to the conversation, let me predict that we're gonna get so much better at free-to-play game monetization, because I think with all the experience that we have and all the nice tricks, we still have a lot to learn. And we spend most of our time kind of rearranging all the familiar blocks, and especially when designing new games, we always want to innovate, but we always want to use the proven things first to minimize the risk. And then when we get to the stage where we can truly experiment, we sunset the game in many cases. We move on to the next one. And I honestly think that many of the more conventional businesses are much better at monetizing their audiences with less sophisticated tools, without access to real-time analytics and all the fine optimizations that we can apply across so many channels. So my prediction is we're gonna get good. So get ready to get good.
Excellent, good. Okay, so final question, and let's just make this sort of fast, kind of what each one thinks with the kind of whys. But so it's and I guess it's maybe this is a point of inspiration for people as they're kind of hopefully they're still with us. It's like as you look at the cutting edge of design, and free to play games out there, like tell us what it's a game or two recent games that you think just stand out as great examples that are kind of inspiring, that people should take a look at if they want to study to learn about good monetization. So I guess we'll do we'll go my right to left. So Patrick, so kind of quickly, game stands out in your mind, and why?
Yeah, I mean the game I mentioned earlier, 7 Deadly Sins.
Okay, yeah.
The art style might not be for everyone, but the game itself, the mechanics and the systems within it, the depth is unreal. They have strong engagement loops. The live ops is like absolutely the winner. Tons of capabilities and hooks that they can rely on. They just use all the tricks. You want a subscription? They got it. Bundles, they got it. I mean, they have 5, 6, 7 different stores. RNG, purchasing stuff straight up for hard currency. The scalability is classic, RPG. And yeah, again, just
one for 7 deadly sins. Yeah. Simo?
For me, it's Empires and Puzzles, which I just mentioned.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For me, the reason is that they also, with the really good offers, they also do, in my opinion, really bad offers, which I love, because that makes the really good ones absolutely irresistible. And
it's a decoy, so it's kind of like pricing with decoy pricing.
Yeah, anchoring. It's price anchoring, right?
It is very, very good anchoring, and it almost looks like it's like legacy offers that they haven't replaced, but I'm not sure. It's probably intentional. And on top of that, the gameplay, I think it's the perfect kind of sweet spot between casual and very hardcore. So it doesn't have as many features like these Asian RPGs have. So it has one store, etc. So it's simple, it's understandable. You kind of, if you play it very mathematically, it doesn't go over your head. So it's I think it's super good.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And hey, look, maybe I am kind of curious to know if those are deliberate decoy stuff too. So, and since Small Giant Games isn't Helsinki, maybe you might find them in a cafe bar. You ask that question. So, Vlad, how about you? Yeah, what game you thought was really well done, inspiring?
If you allow me a comment on Small Giant Games, knowing something about their philosophy of not discarding anything, I would totally buy into the idea of this just being legacy offers. I mean, they're not hurting anyone. They sit there. Maybe someone buys them, and I love the point about decoys and bad offers creating value for the more recent ones. We actually do the same thing, not always consciously, but sometimes when we roll something better than what we've done before, we leave the old one in just to A/B test, and then it stays there because it's making money. Going back to the question, I actually ran a micro poll among the game designer community within the company. I asked the guys what surprised them or what they liked, and the winner was Knighthood by King, which everyone said the same thing about. We are not in love with the game itself, but we love how well produced it is. Everything seems so very well designed and so thoughtful that it triggers something in the game designer soul. So I had to single that one out.
Good. Excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Good, thoughtful insights.